guys, it's Kelly here and I am back with another video. This video is actually going up a little late, but that's okay. I am using the new Hero Studio release. This released last Monday. It is still in stock. But I am using the Pebbles and Stones stencil, their clear stamps and die of the month, and then two of the extraordinary extras, which is the tropical fish and the nautical messages. And those are just regular things. There's no subscription for that. We'll talk about it a little more as we go along. But you guys know I'm a big fan of like stretching your supplies and getting the most out of them. So we are going to make 4 cards today. 4 is a lot. It is a long video. Get your beverage, get your popcorn, sit down, snuggle in with your little, doggy or kitty, and just, wait it out because this is a long one. It's a long one, guys. But anywho, I wanted to use this Pebble stencil. We'll talk about the studio a bit more and kind of price points, but the stencil itself is $8. Stencils are such a great way to add to your stash so that you feel like you have something new without like really breaking the budget. So I wanted to show all the different ways that we could use just this one stencil. So the first idea I had upon seeing this stencil, outside of it obviously being Pebbles and Stones, is that it kind of looked like surf, like with it sitting on top of the water. So this background that I'm making here, I'm doing a little bit of sand in the bottom left-hand corner and a little bit of water in the top right-hand corner, and I'm leaving a very large blank space in the middle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my Pebbles and Stones, or is it Pebbles and Stones? Yeah, that's what it is, right? That's what we just said, isn't it? Who knows? Moving on. It'll be linked below. But anyway, I'm going to put that on my sticky mat to hold it in place while I do my stenciling. And then I am going to go right over top of it with the same colors that we just used. Now, I did not use the Cup of Joe. I only used the sand for the sand portion because I didn't want it to be too dark in that kind of corner. I wanted the stencil to kind of fade off. But for the water, I did take the mist, which is the lightest color, almost all the way up to that sand. I just left very little white in between them. And obviously anything that we have the stencil on top of will remain white as well. But I wanted it to be very much a beachy feel of like sand meets ocean. And this will be the only one that I'm going to show you in regular time. All the stenciling will be in regular time, but the background ink blending will be kind of sped up. I was trying to just jam pack this video with so much content but I didn't want it to be like an hour of your life. So anyway, I'm going back in with those same blues for the water. I'm using the same ones, the same inks over and over again. I used Mist, Summer Sky, Deep Ocean, and Nautical. The Nautical I was more light-handed with. It is a deep navy, but you obviously have to build up to that when you're using the brushes. So this is the first background, and we are going to set that aside. The next background, we're going to use the stencil to kind of create our own pattern paper. So I'm going in with the Mist first. This is the same white cardstock that I use for everything. This is Nina 80-pound solar white cardstock because I like coloring on it. So that's where I make my investment because I am a colorist. But basically, I'm doing kind of like a halo. So I went in with the Mist first, and then I'm going to start adding my darker colors from lightest to darkest or just around the edges in a kind of halo effect. That's so when I put my sentiment or my focal point into the center of this, it's really going to pop because we have those darker edges that kind of lead our eye into the center. So stencils, of course, are always great to, create our own patterns with. And I do all of my ink blending twice, especially with the brushes because they are a lighter application. If you want a darker color, you do kind of need to go over it multiple times. So I did it twice in the background, and then we're going to move on to the stenciling. And I'm going to do it the same way from, the Mist is already down there, lightest in the center. So for my stenciling, I'm going to do the first color is Summer Sky, just so that it's slightly darker and you can still see the pattern. I'm going to do this one all over, and then I will be adding that deep ocean around the edges and the nautical around the edges as well. My original game plan was not to have a like a landing piece for the image that I was going to put on there. That is how the card ended up coming together. So you really don't see that halo as much, as it looks just like a piece of pattern paper. But either way is fine. You could use it either way. My image was just not large enough to carry an A2 size card solo. But there is the pattern paper. This one, we are going to create a scene card. Now, I'm a big fan of scene cards. So I'm adding a little bit of sand at the bottom with those same two colors that we used before, that sand and Cup of Joe. And then now, instead of doing a halo, we're going to do kind of like a gradient. So I have the mist at the bottom where it's going to meet that sand color. And then I'm bringing the summer sky all the way down to the mist. And then I will move to the deep ocean about halfway down, and then the nautical about a quarter of the way down. And this is going to give us a nice little ocean kind of under the water scene that we can play around with some of the images that we have to build a scene. So once I have that done, I'll put the stencil in place. And with this one, we're going to let the stencil fade off right where that mist kind of meets the sand. So I'm starting off with the nautical at the top, which is going to be my darkest color. And then that way I can go over that with each of the consecutive colors to help blend it, because it is just going to fade off to nothing down at the bottom, which gives a really cool effect, because it makes it look as if it is water, adds interest to the piece, but doesn't completely overtake the images that we are going to add to it to build our scene up. So here's the last color. This is that summer sky. And again, we're stopping just short of that mist. And then when we remove it, it just kind of blends in. For the last one, we are going to be using the stencil as it is intended. Kind of. We are going to be using them as stones, pebbles and stones. That's how we're using them. So I did have to switch up my colors. For this, I chose to go with the granite and the charcoal so that they would be a bit grayer. My idea for this was that it would be like stones or pebbles underneath the water. So I am going in with the granite and the charcoal to, get the base color of the pebbles. Obviously, everything in between is still white because we started with a white piece of cardstock, but it's not going to stay white. So I'm just kind of varying how dark or how light the ink is, just to get some more interest. And then I'm not going to pick up any of the sand. I'm just going to use what's left over on my brush, on my brown brush, and just add that to a couple of spots. Again, this is just going to create some warmer tones that are going to add interest. In order to get the look of the stones being underwater, I'm going to put that summer sky right over top of everything so that it has that little bit of a blue cast that you would see if the rocks were actually under the water. So here's all of the backgrounds. That one with where we use the pebbles for them to be, that one's not done yet. That will be done when we get to the end of the video and we're putting the card together. Here I've laid out so many stamps. So I think this is all of the tropical fishes as well as the mermaids, which is the clear stamps and dies kit. Is that what they're still calling them? I think that's what they're still calling them. But anyway, so I'm inking all of these up with Hero Arts Intense Black ink. This is safe for alcohol markers. And I did stamp them twice, just full disclosure. And then I also stamped my sentiments and the anchor and things from Nautical Messages on a separate piece. But again, for time's sake, since the process is exactly the same, I left it out. Please forgive me. It's so hard for me to leave things out, but I wanted to be able to get in all of the backgrounds and as much of the coloring as I possibly could. So that is how that happened. Here I'm going in with, I typically when I'm coloring people or mermaids who are half people, I do start with my skin tones first. So I'm going in and she doesn't have a defined line where like the bottom of her top would end or the top of her tail would end. So I just guesstimated, and then, put in the shading. Obviously where her hair is laying, there's going to be more shading. Her chest and her belly would be a bit darker because they're kind of, inset, whereas the outside of her forearm or, on the hand that's out, the inside of her forearm is going to definitely catch more light. For her hair, she's got this long flowing hair. I did go with more natural colors, but it would be really fun to do like a hot pink or purple or blue, because she's a mermaid. That would be super fun. I'm just not super fun. Just ask my husband. So anyway, going in, we're looking for any portions of the hair where it kind of curls in. We would add our shadows to those. The sections of the curl that kind of pop out is where you would want your highlight to be. And then because I like matchy cards, guys. I do. So I like to keep continuity in my coloring or my color schemes. I am going to do the other mermaid with a darker skin tone. So instead of coloring her hair dark, I am going to color her skin tone with the same colors we just did for our other mermaid's hair. Same thing, her chest is going to be a bit darker. The arm that's back behind the seahorse is going to be a bit darker, where her hair is falling over her shoulder, a bit darker. And then that arm that is out, kind of holding on to the seahorse, that's going to catch the majority of the highlight as well as the side of her face. So we're going to go through, we're going to do the coloring, and we're going to talk a little bit about the studio. So when Hero Arts switched, now they used to do My Monthly Hero, and that was a kit that you could purchase that had so many things in it. I think it was like $35 or $40 a month. I'm not sure, but it had a ton of stuff in it. They have since switched now. This is the second Hero Studio that they've put out, and they've kind of made it more accessible for everybody. So there's still a card kit of the month, which is very similar to their My Monthly Heroes. And you can purchase that. That includes, lots of extras like stamps, dies, papers, inks, things like that. And that is $49.99. It's more comparable to like what their premium kits were, if you were familiar with those. And then they have one that is just the clear stamp and coordinating die, which that's what I have found myself using the last 2 months. And that is $29.99. So you get this, in this case, it's the mermaids and those sentiments and their coordinating dies. They also do a layering stencil of the month. This month, it is fish. It is not the stencil we're using today. Fancy dies of the month, and then a cling stamp of the month. And these are all varying price points. The layering stencil and the cling stamp are both $15.99, and the fancy dies are $26.99. With that, they have stuck with the same idea of doing, they used to call them add-ons, but now they're called extraordinary extras. And these are they are stamps, dies, things like that really support the theme of the release, but they will be in the shop permanently. It is not a, when they're out, they're out. If you're not subscribed and they sell out, then you're just out of luck. These will be in long term. And that for us this time around is the Pebbles and Stone stencil, the tropical fishes, the nautical messages, and then there's another color layering stencil that is beach balls. So those are the extraordinary extras. You can shop those anytime, just anytime. So I just wanted to kind of briefly go over that, because I think the last time that I did the studio, like for the release, I didn't really go in depth as to what it is. And you might be a person who doesn't need that in depth, kind of what they're doing now. I've been a Hero Arts fan for a long time. In fact, when I first started, my goal was to make the Hero Arts team. That was like the design team that I wanted to be a part of. 2 years ago, I achieved that goal, was super excited to be on the team. And then just due to my own schedule and the way that my life kind of goes, I just could not commit for another year of doing it. But I still want to support them however I can because they're wonderful company. And they've been around so long with so much great stuff. Like when I first started, the vast majority of my my collection was Hero Arts. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about these fish. So I did not know which fish were going to end up with which card or which mermaids were going to end up with which card when I was coloring them. So I kind of just stuck to adding the shadows to the underneath of my fish, like the darkest parts to the underneath, to their little bellies, as if the light was hitting the top of their bodies and their top fins. So that's the shading that I did, and I did it that way for just all of them. It just seemed to make the most sense. Same thing with the kind of like the corals and the seashells, the rocks. I did the coloring as if the shading, as if the light source was going to be from kind of like the top right down. That's just where I'm comfortable at. So that's how I did it. Obviously, one of the most fun things about summer cards like this is all of the bright colors that are available to us. So I certainly did not skimp on the bright colors because I think that they're just a ton of fun. For the mermaid's tail, I'm only showing you one of the two because I colored them the same way, even though they're different colors, like one is blue green and one is pink and purple. They're done the same way. So I added some shadow underneath her, kind of her tush, and then where her tail is curving down. And then all of the other color that I added in a series of small dots, otherwise known as stippling. And that is going to help me blend it into another color. Same thing for the seahorse here. I did not use the stippling, but I kept all of the kind of pink, that hot pink, to the back side of the seahorse. And I didn't carry it all the way down through the tail. I let the yellow do that part. But this is a really easy way to do like the two-tone coloring. When you're working out to your lightest color, you just want to make sure your lightest color is going to blend. So for me, that pink that starts at an RV09, goes to a 6, a 4, and then a 2. So then for my yellows, my lightest yellow is a Y02. Because they both end in 2, they're going to work really nicely together. And then the same thing for the purple on the tail of the other mermaid. The purple is a V09, 06, 04, and an 01. 1 is right next to 2, so that those are going to work really nicely together. For the starfish, I added some shading definitely into like the nooks and crannies there, so that it gives the appearance the lightest area is lifted, so it gives a more 3D look. So I've added my light mid-tone to the edges, but I have left the center and kind of the part that trails down each, starfish leg. I don't even know, are they called legs? Each side of the starfish. I left them so that they would be that lightest color to really lift it up and help it to be dimensional. I also chose to do the other side of this seahorse yellow because I thought the yellow and the pink would work really nicely together. So I'm still adding a little bit of shading with that YR24, but for the most part, I am, leaving it so that I can blend it in with the Y02, which is what I'm doing there. And the 2 goes really nicely with that RV02, and I don't have to worry that they're not going to blend. For these 2 fish, and you know what, do you remember when on my channel, if you've been here a long time, you might remember the fish saga where we had Mr. Orangey Talkie, and then we won him at a carnival. He died very quickly. I was not a party to getting the fish. This was an aunt's doing. Both of my sisters let Peanut get Mr. Orangey Talkie. And then I had to buy whole thing, like a whole tank, and then he died, and then we got more fish, and then they kept dying, and I kept having to replace them, and Jeffrey, the serial killer, was the only one that remained. But you would think that after going through that whole saga of all of these fish that came to our house and then went to be with Jesus very, very rapidly, that I would be more comfortable with what types of fish or what, but I'm actually not. I have no idea. I think this one, I didn't show me coloring in the yellow because honestly, on those stripes and circles for the yellow, I did not do any shading. I just used a Y08. I'm going to do all of my shading with the purple. Is this an angelfish? An anglerfish? What are those called? I don't know. I know they're not pretty. Just like I think that green one is maybe a carp. If it's not, it should be. It looks like its name should be a carp. I'm not really sure. That one kind of that I colored orange looked like he could be a goldfish to me. He didn't really have a lot going on there. So basically, I just went with colors that matched the colors of everything else I was coloring that I thought looked nice together. And maybe somewhere in the back of my mind, I remembered that some fish are colored that way. I know there's blue and yellow fish out there. Do they look like these fish? I have no idea. Just like that one that looks like Nemo. Are those clownfishes that are black and white and orange? Is Nemo a clownfish? Dory's blue and yellow. What's Dory? Maybe that's why I colored that fish a blue and yellow with the black, because that looks like Dory. I don't know. Anyway, I only know fish from Disney movies, apparently. That's all I have to offer you. So here, I felt like her skin tone was kind of getting lost in her hair, so I just went in with a little bit of a darker brown and kind of added some shadows there. Then we're going to move on to this one. Originally, I colored the anchor with just a W3 and a W1. Later on, I am going to go back and change that because I feel like it wasn't quite dark enough. This piece over here, I actually didn't end up using. I needed... Like, I was going for a collage kind of look, basically, and that one did not fit what I had in mind. So I used the same browns that I used for the mermaid skin tone and hair to color in my little ship wheel here. And then I'm going to do kind of a mix of my brown combination and my yellow combination for the rope. So I'm still going to use the E39 and the E37, but then I'm going to switch over to the YR24 and the Y08 so that the rope looks a little bit more golden. So everything is not the same exact color when I go to put my little collage together. You probably have noticed that all the sentiments are on here as well. I did leave all of the sentiments white. That's not something I always do, but I did this time. So I don't have these cut apart yet. I have my little Hero Arts nippers and I'm going to start cutting all of the dies apart. This does take a little bit of time, but then once they're apart, they're apart. So I don't have to worry about it. What was I going to say? All of them have a bundle available. So like if you want, the mermaids is the clear kit. Stamps and dies, so obviously it has dies. But like the tropical fishes, you can buy by itself, or you can buy the bundle with the dies. The nautical messages, you can buy just the stamp, or you can buy it with the dies. So once I started kind of separating everything out, I realized that I needed some things to help kind of pull my design together. I settled on the arches, even though I just did cards that had arches. I don't know, I was really feeling the arches. So one of them, I used the negative up here with the pebbles and the fish. This one, I wanted just a frame for my collage look. So I am going to trim it down so the frame is just a bit thinner. For this one, I opted just to do a smaller rectangle. I am going to use a peacock. That is the color. This is a Hero Arts cardstock. They have great cardstock if you've never used it. But that's cut just slightly larger than my white frame. And I told you this earlier, like it really kind of covers up the halo effect that we were going for, but that's okay. It still looks like water in the background. It just looks a little bit more like pattern paper, and that's cool. So I did pop up the white with some foam tape on top of that little peacock mat, which honestly matches that background pretty well. I mean, it's pretty much a spot on match. And then I'm going to use just the mermaid with the seahorse. She's a pretty large image and can carry the card with a have a mermazing day. I was a little back and forth about where to do the sentiment, but ultimately I decided just to keep it centered, and I'm going to add gems later on. For this one, this is the collage style. I'm going to be very, very honest because I think that that's super important. If I had to do it all over again and I knew that I was going to want to pop up this frame, I would not have used foam tape. I would have cut a bunch of the same frame and glued them together. But I didn't know, and so I only cut one, and I had already taken them apart, and there was no guarantee that I was going to be able to get it exactly the same way. So I just had to suck it up and go with the real thin foam tape, whether I liked it or not. It was a little bit frustrating. Ultimately, love how the card came out, and it was worth it to pop that up, but I was aggravated with myself about it. Here's where I've decided, as you can see, I'm busy digging through all of my markers on the left-hand side that I've already used, and ultimately came up with the C5 to add a little bit more shading, blending that in with the same gray markers that we used the first time, those W3 and W1, those warm grays. This is just going to give us a little bit more contrast. I popped up all of the elements for this one because there isn't a lot going on. We really just have this collage kind of in the middle. I think this is a super fun wedding card, that you could give to somebody who's maybe doing a destination wedding or something like that. I think that it's really very easy to do, not a lot of coloring required, and that background just kind of speaks for itself. So I did end up popping up the happily ever after with 2 things of foam tape so that it would kind of sit above my little wheel, my steering wheel, and my knot. So they're kind of going to be tucked under. Plus, it's the center point of my collage, so I kind of need that in place before I can put anything else down permanently. So I put the happy ever after, and then I'm going to tuck in my little knot, which, like tie the knot, it goes together. You know what I'm saying? And then I popped up the steering wheel and the anchor on the left and right hand side. And then that one is done until we get to the gemstones portion. Here is our scene card. I'm a sucker for a scene card, especially if it has lots of bright colors in it. That just makes my heart happy because I love bright colors. So here what I am doing is I prefer to do it this way. If I'm not going to use press and seal, I like to lay everything out, and then I just put a little bit of glue where I needed to pick up the next die cut. So I'm not trying to adhere it to the background just yet. I'm just trying to pick up all my die cuts so that they hold secure where I want them to be, and I'm not chasing them all over. And then I glue them as one whole piece. So that's what you see me doing there. These and the rocks and coral on the left-hand side went down flat. I chose to pop up the sentiment, the seahorse, and the mermaid. That just kind of brings them a little bit up and makes it more interesting. We have these, multiple levels of things going on. So they were all popped up on foam. And then the fish in the background, I just glued down flat. So we have, just a couple of different layers of things going on, and it does make it so that it is just a little bit more interesting. If you have watched any of my videos before, the next step in the process will not surprise you whatsoever. I don't love the white outline that comes with the die cuts. And the one that we did with the mermaid, I mounted her on white cardstock, so it didn't matter. And in the wedding card, it didn't matter because our frame was white, so it made sense to leave everything else framed in white as well. But for a scene, I want my die cuts to blend into my scene, so that is what you see me doing here. I will go through, I will try very hard to match my ink blending colors to the colors that I've already put down. Sometimes that means that I do have to kind of layer colors over top of each other. Like right now I'm using a cooler brown just because of the browns that we chose to use for our ink blending. They are a bit on the cooler side. And then once I lay that down, I'll be able to come in with a blue-green, and there will be some sections that I'm going to go right over top of that brown because that's what I did when I was ink blending. So in order to get the color matched, that's what I have to do. So once everything has been matched, I did go in and add a shadow and just a little bit of texture to the sandy bottom. And I repeated those same browns again, that E30s family that we've been working with. It is a bit warmer than I would normally do for sand, but I think that that's okay. And I did that same trick with the stippling to this time not blend the colors, but to help create some sandy texture down at the bottom. And then we're going to move on to the last background. Now, I told you this one before, if this one was not done, that I still needed to do more to it, and that's because I did some coloring on it. So here, I'm just laying that negative down so I can mark what I'll be able to see. There's no point in coloring the entire background if I'm not going to be able to see the entire background, so I'm going to save myself the time and the ink. So first things first, I'm going in with a C5 and I'm just adding a little bit of shading. There's really no rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes I add it to the whole bottom. Sometimes I add it just to the bottom left. And then I'm going to blend these out with these cool grays. I used the C5, then the C3, and then I brought in the C1 and I was like, oh, I need to do kind of the warm tones that we did, with the brush. So I'm going to start doing the C1 and then I'm going to be like, no, I need to bring in some brown tones. So I just grabbed that same kind of brown marker that I used to match the sand. I think it's an E40, maybe a 42. I'm not positive. But that one I used, and I didn't put it on every rock. I just put a little bit on a couple, and then I will go back in and blend everything out with the C1, whether it was warm or cool. I used the C1 to blend it out. And then for the water portion, because I do want this to look a little bit more dimensional, I'm going to go in with my darkest blue, which for me is a B06, and I'm going to add in a shadow. Again, I did all of my coloring as if my shadows were kind of coming, or if my light source was from the top. So all of my shadows are kind of down to the bottom or down to the bottom left. And that's what I'm doing here with the darkest color. I have sped this up a little bit. But so that way we're going to start to kind of bring up that dimension so that the rocks look like they're sitting, sitting in the water. So once I had the B, maybe it was a B04, not a B06. No, it was a B06. And this is the B04. So that I'm blending that out. And then I'll come in and the B02 will be the lightest color. I'm just going to fill in any extra spaces. Here I noticed a couple of rocks that I missed. So I'm just going to go back in and add in a little bit of shadow. And I know that it looks a little crazy now because you can still see those edges on the outside that don't have any added coloring. But once we put on the negative piece that creates the little arch, you're not going to be able to see any of that. This card really, to me, ended up coming out like a great, just kind of like general neutral birthday card, like the little tropical fishes with the, like the little rock wall. So you could really give that to anybody. We have at our pediatrician's office, we have a fish tank there, and both my kids go to the same pediatrician, but now Peanut's old enough that he doesn't care about the fish tank. But Jellybean loves the fish tank, and as soon as we get there, she runs over to the fish tank while I check us in, and she'll yell at me across the room like, "Mommy, there's a big one, and there's a little one, and there's a big one, and he's hiding." And it's so funny. It's very, very enjoyable to watch her take such joy in it. Before I put my fish down on this one, I am going to add my shimmer pen to the water. Then I'm also going to use my white gel pen to add some highlights to the rocks. And then I'm just going to glue my fish down flat. I did blend them into their backgrounds just like I did the other card. But the only thing popped up on this card is the white frame, the negative of the arch. And then some of them, like I kind of tucked behind a little bit so that they would look like they were, swimming out, the fish that are hiding kind of thing. So I added some highlights to them with the white gel pen. And then also some, I just went through, shimmered what I wanted to shimmer, white gel pen, what I wanted to gel pen for all of the cards. And then we're going to go through and we're going to do the gems. So the gems that I ended up using are actually from Spellbinders, and they have white and like a iridescent kind of like prism one, and I used both for the cards. So here is one last look at all of them, completely finished, all using the same stencil. I hope that you are super inspired. I hope that you will check out, the hero kits if you're interested in any of these products. Thank you for spending your time with me. I always appreciate you, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.